From the moment we are born, we know that our time is limited. Death is the one great certainty that unites all of humanity, a universal experience that shapes our lives, our ambitions, and our relationships. It is the end of the line, the final stop on a journey that we all must take. The knowledge of our own mortality gives life its urgency, its meaning, and its poignancy. It is the ticking clock that forces us to make the most of the time we have. But what if the clock stopped? What if, in a single, silent moment, a scientific breakthrough, a miracle cure, or a biological change made death a thing of the past? What if, in the blink of an eye, the entire human race became immortal? This is a journey into a world where life is not a race against time, but an endless, eternal journey. It is a story of a humanity that has to live with the consequences of its greatest dream, a story of a world that has to find a new purpose for life, and a new meaning for existence. The immediate change, the first generation of immortals. The moment death is no longer a factor, the world would not fall into chaos. It would be a moment of pure, unadulterated joy. The world would erupt in a global celebration, a moment of triumph over our greatest enemy. But the joy would be short-lived, as humanity would have to face the most immediate and pressing problem of a world without death: overpopulation. The world's population, which is already a source of global anxiety, would begin to grow exponentially. Within a few decades, the world's resources would be stretched to their breaking point. Food and water shortages would become a global crisis. The world's governments would be forced to take drastic measures to control the population. The idea of having children would be a thing of the past. The world would become a place of new and terrifying laws, where the right to reproduce is no longer a given. The only people who would be allowed to have children would be those who could afford it, creating a new and horrifying class system. But the most profound change would be in the economy. The concept of retirement would become meaningless. The world would be a place where a person's life is not a finite journey, but an endless one. The old would never retire, and the young would never get a chance to start. The entire economic system would have to be rebuilt from the ground up, based on a new kind of value system, one where a person's worth is not based on their age, but on their ability to contribute to society. The world would be a place of endless work, with no end in sight. The long-term consequences, the burden of immortality, the initial joy of immortality would give way to a new and terrifying reality. The world would become a place of profound stagnation, where the only thing that matters is survival, and the only thing that is certain is that nothing will ever change. The new social hierarchy: in a world without death, our social structure would be fundamentally changed. The old ones would be the immortal elite, with centuries of knowledge, wealth, and power. They would be the ones who would control the world, and the ones who would be the most resistant to change. The young ones, who would be born into this new world, would be a new kind of human, one that is powerless and without purpose. The world would be a place of eternal stagnation, where the old never die, and the young never get a chance to start. Politics and power: in a world where political leaders never die, the concept of a new generation would become meaningless. A leader who was elected in the 21st century would still be in power in the 23rd century. The world would be a place of political stagnation, where the same old ideas, the same old laws, and the same old leaders would rule for all eternity. The only way to change the world would be to resort to violence, to a new kind of war, a war to end immortality, or a war to control it. The world would be a place of new and terrifying conflicts, where the stakes are not just a country, but an entire eternity. The human condition: the greatest consequence of immortality would not be physical or political, it would be philosophical. The human spirit, which has always been defined by its search for meaning, would have to find a new way to live. The loss of death would be the loss of our greatest motivator. The idea of living forever would be a terrifying one, a life without purpose, without a goal, and without a final destination. A world without an end would be a world without a beginning. The loss of love and relationships would be a new kind of hell. In a world where no one dies, the concept of marriage and family would be a thing of the past. People would simply drift from relationship to relationship, with no commitment and no permanence. The world would be a place of eternal loneliness, where a person would be forced to watch their loved ones grow old and die, but never die themselves. The unseen downsides, the burden of memory: the most profound and terrifying consequence of immortality would be the burden of memory. A person who lives for eternity would have to live with every memory, every mistake, and every regret for all time. The burden of 1,000 years of memory would be a crushing one, a weight that would drive a person to the brink of madness. The world would be a place of a new kind of mental health crisis, where the only way to escape the past would be to lose your mind. The loss of progress would be a new kind of stagnation. A world where no one dies would be a world where no new ideas are born. The old would be in power, and they would be resistant to change. The world would be a place of eternal stasis, a world that is living in a state of a never-ending present. The loss of our most cherished ideals would be a new kind of hell. The world would be a place of endless boredom, with no end in sight. If you were offered immortality, would you take it, and why? Do you think a world without death would be a more peaceful or a more violent place? Do you think a world of endless life would be a world of endless love, or a world of endless loneliness? This timeline is a terrifying reminder that some of our greatest dreams are also our greatest fears. It is a story of a humanity that has to live with the consequences of its greatest wish. It is a world where the past is not a memory, but a future. If you want to keep exploring the what-ifs and see how our world could be different, make sure to like this video, subscribe to Timeline Shift, and get ready for our next adventure.